Good evening. As we usher in this week Parshas Vayikra with the new Sefer, after having said Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek, we come into the Chumash, the third Chumash of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah of Vayikra. And we also have this Shabbos, Parshas Zohar. And then Motzoi Shabbos is Purim. So I just want to say briefly, throughout the night, throughout the hour that we spend together, something on Purim, something on Parshas Zohar, and then of course the meat and the main shir will be on Vayikra. Now, we know that Parshas Zohar is the only one of the four parshios that everyone agrees is a d'oraisa. Parshas Parah next week is something that some hold it is d'oraisa, some hold it's not d'oraisa. But Parshas Zohar, so every man and every woman should make sure to go hear the parsha from a good Balkoira who's very distinct and very clear and pronounces each and every word very carefully. Then we go into Purim, which, as I mentioned to you, the Bnei Yissaschar says there's no mazel for the second Adar. He holds that the mazel for Adar is the first Adar, Dogim. But the second month of Adar is so high in source that it doesn't require a mazel to propel Klal Yisrael into the realm of having things happen and good things happening to him. The mere fact that we are in the month of Adar Sheni, that it's above the mazalos, and therefore there is no mazel for this month according to the Bnei Yissaschar. Now, Purim, we know that many Midrashim say that it will be the same after Mashiach comes as it is today. What does that mean? Because it says that all the Yomim Tovim will be batal, and even though the Torah is nitzchias, but the tzura of how we have the Yom Tov today will not be the same as when Mashiach will come. But Purim, according to everyone in all the Midrashim, some say even Chanukah, but not everyone says that Chanukah will be, that Purim will remain the same in Surah because it's the Olam HaKeser, which is above Atzilus. It's so high. And that's why we have four mitzvahs on Purim: Kriyas HaMegillah, Matanos Levyonim, Mishloach Monos, and Mishteh. And in Shulchan Aruch, all four of them are referred to by a name that begins with a mem. Mishloach Monos, Matanos Le'evyonim, Mikra Megillah, and what? And Mishteh. So that's four with a mem. And says the Bnei Yissaschar, because mem represents 40, it's gematria of 40, and that there are 40 saw in a mikveh to make it kshera. That's a certain amount of water that has to be in the measurement is called saw. And since in a mikveh the minimum requirement is arboim saw, 40 saw, and that's a mem, that it tells you that the realm of Purim, when we do the mitzvahs, is like dipping into a mikveh. That means each and every mitzvah that we do on Purim is so high in its source that it's like doing the mitzvah and being toivel in a mikveh. That's how big the actual day is. Now we know that Erev Yom Kippur, that there's a mitzvah to eat. And then the next day, Yom Kippur, we fast. But by Yom Purim, it's the opposite. On Purim, we first fast, Tanis Esther, and then we go into the realm of Purim, that it's a day of eating and rejoicing, and even shalach manas, if it's not ready to be eaten, that means if somebody sends somebody a steak and it's raw, that he can't eat it when he receives the shalach manas, so then it is not considered what shalach manas has to be, al pi halacha. It has to be able to be eaten right then and there. And likewise, the Mishnah that we have, the Sudas Purim, that we eat and we enjoy. And when we send shalach manas, it's food items for people to eat. And matanos levyonim is money, but it's for aniyim to be able to also buy things and enjoy them. And then Mikra Megillah, which brings down the Shefa and everything from the Olam HaKeser as we listen to the Megillah, that there are great things happening. And say the tzaddikim, the Bnei Yisachar and others, that Erev Yom Kippur, we have a mitzvah say d'oraisa of eating all day. And like I mentioned to you before Yom Kippur, that's why the Brisker Rav always had a candy in his mouth, Erev Yom Kippur, because every minute was a mitzvah to eat. But the level of the eating, we're mekayim a mitzvah, but then we go to a higher level of fasting. And that's a d'oraisa also, v'nisem es nafsho seichem. But Purim takes off at a higher level, that we first have the fast, which is comparable to the Yom Kippur. It's not a d'oraisa Tainus Esther, but we fast. And then we, we go into the realm of eating, because neshamas that are in the food get their aliyah by the eating. And that's why Shabbos, it's so important. It says that when someone says a Dvar Torah at his table, on Shabbos, the neshamas that are all inside of the different foods have their aliyah and they go back to their shoyrish. And it's the eating that does it. Likewise, on Purim, which is so high that we don't need the fasting to get there. But we have the fasting first, and then on the Purim itself, we are eating and we are mala the neshamas to the highest level, even tzaddikim gemurim that need an aliyah for whatever reason it may be. Get it on Purim with the achila. That's why we have such a stress on the achila and on the eating. And when it says that kol ha-poishet yad noisnim lo, that every person, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, that anyone that comes up to you for tzedakah, you must give. That means, doesn't mean you have to give a $10 bill, you can give $1. And if not $1, give a quarter or a dime. But you have to give. Now, why does the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch refer to kol ha-poishet yad? Why doesn't it say kol ha-mavakish, somebody who asks you for tzedakah, give them? Why does it mention yad? Because there's a heichel in Shamayim called Yad Vayar Yisrael es hayod hagedola, that Klal Yisrael saw and were at a level of Yad Gedola, that they were able to be at the level like even a shivcha, ro'asa shivcha alayam mashalo ro Yechezkel ben Buzia b'mara nevuah, that even a simple maidservant on the Yam, she was able to see a vision of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that even Yechezkel never saw. And he was a Navi, and he saw Nevuah every day. So that Yad, and that's why it says by Ruvain that he convinced them not to do anything with Yosef. And it says, Vayishma Ruvain heard, Vayatzilehu miyodam. Now the word miyodam, many people think it means that Ruvain heard what's going on, Vayatzileu miyodam, and he saved them from their hands. But it doesn't say miyadehem. Miyadehem is the plural. But it only says Vayatzileu miyodam. He saved Yosef from their hand, a singular, telling us that the Shivtei Ko were so high, and that's why the Zohar Kodesh says that even though they were Chayav Misa, because they went and sold, if someone kidnaps somebody, it's a lav, but if somebody kidnaps and sells and gets money, you're Chayav Misa. So the Zohar Kodesh asks, so why weren't they killed? So the Zohar answers, because there was no Malach Saraf or Oifan or Chayas HaKodesh in Shemayim that was big enough to be able to effectuate a punishment and kill any of the Shivtei Ko. So they had to be in this galgal 1700 years until the Asara Haruge Malchus, and that's when they actually died. But the pasuk is Vayishma Ruven Vayatzileu miyodam. He saved Yosef from their hand, that they corresponded to the oilam of Yad. Vayar Yisrael as Hayod Hagdola. That's why they were so high that they were untouchable by any malach or sarav to effectuate a punishment in them. So we see that. And so therefore the Shulchan Aruch says, Kol ha-poishet yad noisnim lo. Because on Purim we're connected that oilam of yad, that it's so big that when somebody comes, a yid comes to a yid and wants to give, asks for tzedakah, we're not allowed to say no. In other words, the whole year, technically, if somebody wants to say no, I mean, it's a rachmanis on them because they have a opportunity to give tzedakah. It's like the biggest thing. Tzedakah is the only thing that it says. Tatzil mimoves, it saves from death, and it's mevi geula. And I repeat that to you very often because people are given such opportunities with giving tzedakah, and they're not in the mood, they don't want to be bothered, they just gave this. They take a look at the guy and they're sizing up if he deserves it or should they give or not. And I always told my students for over 50 years that when a yid comes up to you on the street or at the door of your house, wherever it may be, we have a opportunity to give tzedakah. Don't let the Yetzer Hara talk you in not to giving. But on Purim, you're not allowed to turn down. It says before Shulchan Aruch, Kol haposhit yad noisnim lo. So carry with you quarters or dimes that little children come up to you on the street on Purim. Just give them the quarter or the dollar bill or whatever you can give, that you're Makayim the Inyan, because when you do, it's corresponding to that oilam of Yad, and you're Zoicha to Gewaltige Shefa and Bracha from there. Now, the day after Purim is Shushan Purim, which is even in some respects higher. And there's really on Shushan Purim, there's no need for these mitzvahs because we are propelled by the day itself, like on an elevator that takes you up to the 100th floor. That is Shushan Purim. And that's why in Eretz Yisrael, not everyone keeps Shushan Purim. Most of the cities keep the Purim that we keep. But let's say Yerushalayim, which is Ir HaKodesh, Yerushalayim, that their Purim that they have with all the mitzvahs is on the day that corresponds, that's even higher than the regular Purim, the day of Shushan Purim. So every name of the characters in the Megillah, Esther, how do we know Esther? Says the Gemara Vim, Aster, Aster, Fonai, Mehem, that it's like secret, it's covered. Mordechai is Moradachya, the Besamim, the Ketoris that we had, the biggest things in the world, because Esther was called Hadassah, like a smelling thing, and that's the same thing as Mordechai. So, and they knew from the beginning that there was never going to be anything happening to any Yidden. They were Nevi'im. But they knew that Klal Yisrael did something terrible, and if they didn't go through the motion of crying and screaming and fasting and all that, then the Yidden would not wake up to do tshuva and to bring themselves out of the mud that they put themselves in that door. And another point that you should remember is that when the Torah was given on Har Sinai, the Klal Yisrael was makabel the Torah. They said Nasa v'Nishma, but they were makabel the whole Torah. But the Torah Shebal Peh, they were not makabel mitoch ahava. In other words, by the story, by the Har Sinai, the myriad Har Sinai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as the Gemara says, said to them, he picked up the mountain over them, and he said, listen, if you're going to accept it, wonderful. And if not, Sham tehei kivuraschem. That's where your death is going to be. I'm going to drop the mountain on you, and you're going to all die. So they accepted, but it was mitoch yira. They were afraid. They were being threatened with life and death. 900 years later, like 940, the Klal Yisrael on Purim, the story of Esther and Mordechai, re-accepted the Torah out of love, mitoch ahava. And it took them 900 years. And they went through they went through the first Beis Hamikdash, and they went through the Tekufa of 15 Shoiftim. The first Shoifet being Asniel ben Kenaz, then Shamgar ben Ehud ben Gera, and then Shamgar ben Anas, all the way down. The 15th was Shmuel HaNavi. He was a Navi and a Shoifet. But they didn't accept the Torah yet, mitoch ahava. And they went through Shaul HaMelech and David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech and all of the Nevi'im, Yirmiyahu, and they still were not makabel the Torah shebal peh mitoch ahava. Came Purim, they were thrust into such a realm so high up that they were able, bepem mole, to call out that we are accepting the Torah mitoch ahava, and that's on the words in the Megillah, say the Chazal, kimu v'kiblu, says the Gemara, kimu v'kiblu mashe kiblu kvar. That means they already accepted the Torah, but it wasn't at the level of Ava. It was at the level of Yira. So when we come to Purim, every second you go into Shomer Shabbos by Chatzos, which is like 1:03 in the middle of the night, and you'll see 1,000 people. You can't even walk into the shul, by the men or by the women. And they say the Hotilim till 3:30 in the morning, and then they have music and they dance at 4 o'clock in the morning. But we say Tilim, then the biggest Ace Ratzon, and the Koyach of Tilim, which is so overwhelming, positive, and potent in its effect for Klal Yisrael, that in the height of the height, Purim by Chatzos at night, we say Tilim, and that is what people should be doing on Purim. This hoilalis with acting like clowns, I mean, there's not, by the way, it's brought down. 2,000 years ago, the children masqueraded and put on costumes. Why? Because to tell you, 2,000 years ago, because to tell you that the day is so hidden, like a person wearing a costume, you can't tell who they are. That the day is so exalted and so auspicious and so special every second that it's higher than high, and it's hidden. Just like the kids reflect in a costume that they cannot be seen. So bottom line is that Purim is a matana, and it's so high, like I opened talking about Purim tonight, that it will never be batel. Higher than Yom Kippur, higher than Shavuos, higher than Pesach. Nothing comes to the level of Purim. And as a matter of fact, the Hagos Maimoni in the Rambam brings that a person should not give on Purim to a goy tzedakah. Now we know, and the Rambam himself paskins, that any goy that does a mitzvah gets schar. The only thing he's not allowed to do is to keep Shabbos. And he even pays with his life. If he was a Shomer Shabbos, a goy sheshavas chayav misa. Because Shabbos is not just a mitzvah, it's a matana from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yismach Moshe b'matnas chelko. And since it's a personal matana, like a person to his best friend, or a husband to a wife, there's a special uniqueness to the matana, no matter how expensive or not this matana is. But it's given in a personal sense. And that's how Shabbos is with Klal Yisrael. So the Hagos Maimoni says, but on Purim, which is so high, you shouldn't give tzedakah. Now, the truth is, like the Rambam says, that every mitzvah, and the Rambam paskins beferish, that akum, that means if, let's say, a goy comes up to you, it's a mitzvah to give him money. Maybe he's hungry, maybe he wants to, it's a mitzvah. So why would the Hagos Maimoni said you're not allowed to give on Purim? So he says because the Yetzer Hara is so strong against a Yid living through the mikveh of Purim, that he wants to stop every possible way of the person elevating himself 100 stories, 1,000 stories into the highest place in Shemayim. And the kitrug that the Yetzer Hara says, if you give a goy money for tzedakah, and we're all giving tzedakah the whole day, kol haposhet yad, and also we're giving matanos le'evyonim. But says the Hagos Maimoni, because let's say you have a person that gives to everybody. The Mekatrig in Shemaim could say, oh, he's not giving it l'shem mitzvah. He's the type of person that can't say no. He can't say no, so he's giving to a goy also, and that's the way he's doing his mitzvah, matanos le'evyonim also. Can't say no. And the raya is he's even giving a goy. So the Hagos Maimonides says you shouldn't give a goy to give a pischon peh to the samach mem to say that the mitzvah doesn't mean anything. So don't look at the chashivas of the money to tzedakah, because he's giving out to everybody. He can't hold himself back. So we see the uniqueness of what the day of Purim is, and please utilize in every which way, every single second, haba olenu letoiva, and that each and every yid should be saturated with the shefa of Purim that comes. The person listens to every word. Don't forget Purim, when they wrote an application to the Anshe Knesset Gdola, that Mordechai and Esther wrote, Kisvuni Ladoros, Kavuni Ladoros. They had over 1,000 applications for what to include in the Chav Dalet Kisvei Kodesh. And at the end, they picked what they had, the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the Nevi'im, Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, and Tilim, and the Ksuvim, and it added up to 24. And Megillah Esther is one of them. But of all of them, it was also Kavuni Ladoros. That from all the Yom Tovim, like Hanukkah, has its 8 days that they had the Nes. But there's no mitzvah on Hanukkah to have a Suda. The Shulchan Aruch says, Noyagin, Tzas, Suda, there's like, it's not the level of Purim. And Purim, that when they said Kavuni Ladoros, the Kisvuni Ladoros was to read the Megillah, and it should be written on cloth. But the Kavuni Ladoros was to establish it as a Yom Tov, that we should have a Suda, and we should have the Shalach Manos, and we should have the Matanos Le'evyonim. And the only one that the Anshe Knesses Hagadola included through the koyach of nevuah of what Shamayim would be happy with, that they gave both the reading and the Yom Tov. And that was to Purim. Now, coming to our Sedra of Vayikra, now, the Rambam says, the Vayikra is a sefer basically at the beginning, and for many sedras of korbanos. And as the Ramban says, the word korban means karav, that when a Yid brought a korban, he brought himself closer to our Kodesh Baruch Hu through the vehicle of the korban. The Arizal, so before I tell you the Arizal, the Ramban, the Rambam says that the main mitzvah of korbanos was la'afuke, to exclude the goyim who held the holy cow, that these animals, that they were makriv to avodah zarah, and when we brought a korban in the Mishkan or in the Beis HaMikdash, it was a proclamation of no avodah zarah is attached to this animal, and we're bringing it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So says the Rambam. But the Ramban jumps on the Rambam like there's no tomorrow. He says, Divrei Havoy, like nonsense the Rambam is speaking. We see that Noach brought a korban and Hevel brought a korban before there was Avodah Zarah even in the world. And he says that this was just to bring a Yid closer. It was kapara. It was the vehicle to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and make a nachas ruach for him. And he goes on and on and on. But the Ramban asks a question and says that when we take the korban and we're elevating ourselves, that it was a vehicle, a way of raising up each and every Yid through the actual korban. That's why there's so many detailed halachas in korban. But the Arizal asks the following question. If a Yid, let's say on Shabbos, made a mistake, he jumped out of bed, he didn't remember it was Shabbos, and he did something, he put on the light, or even if, let's say, a person's standing in a room and he's not careful, and he bumped into the light switch and he turned on or turned off the lights. So what does he do? That's called a shoygeg, and he goes and he picks an animal and he brings a korban. Asks the Arizal, why is this animal guilty, killed? Because this guy made a mistake and bumped into the light switch. What is the animal guilty of? So the Arizal answers and says that Mina Shamayim, every time a person went to a flock of cows or sheep, whatever it was, and chose an animal, it was a sign from Shemayim that the neshama of that animal was chayav achatos. And the reason when he looked at 100 animals and chose that one to take to the Bais HaMikdash, even though he didn't know it. But says the Arizal that Min HaShamayim Hashgocha led him to pick an animal that had in a previous life a chiyuv of a chatos, and he never brought the chatos. So when this man goes who has to bring a chatos and chooses the animal, he's bringing a kapara not only for himself, but for the animal also. So says the Arizal. Now, the Meforshim ask, if someone was chayav achatos, like the Gemara says a case, that there was somebody who sat down and he had in front of him 2 pieces of meat. And he thought both were kosher. That the person who brought it to him, that it's definitely kosher. And he ate one. And then they told him that you should know one of them was chaylev, that there's a chi of chorus for having eaten that. Now, if this guy sincerely chose one of the 2 that the Gemara gives this case, why does he have to bring a korban at all? He didn't do like back up into the light switch on Shabbos that he knew he did an Aveira, but it was a mistake. He bumped into it. Over here in the case of the Gemara, it's defined as a total mistake. He was told that both are kosher. So it wasn't like he did a mistake and ate something treif. He found out later that one of them was treif, and he didn't know which one, so he wasn't sure if he ate the one or not. But it wasn't just a shoygig, because when he chose the piece, he was told both are kosher. So he didn't make a mistake. So they answer and say a very interesting thing. Rav Dessler in Michtav Me'Eliyahu, he touches on this concept. And it's a very interesting concept. When a person makes a mistake, it's in the realm of being able to make a mistake. And some people, I remember Rabbi Frand even once said that if somebody wakes up in the morning, he may put on his watch, or he may run out of the house and not remember it's Shabbos and do something which is neged the halacha of Shabbos. But one thing he won't do, he won't run out of the house without his pants on. That means there's certain things that are so etched into the consciousness of a person that he would never make a mistake in that area. And we would agree, no one's going to run out of the house to go to shul or to go to work without his pants on. That means he could forget his watch, he could forget his tie, but he's not going to forget his pants. So says Rav Dessler that a person is supposed to etch into his essence a level of sensitivity that's so strong that he could never come to do it. And that's how there are people that don't wake up Shabbos morning and ever in their lifetime touch an alarm clock and the light goes on to see what time it is, and then 10 seconds later they say, "Oh, Gewalt, what did I do? It's Shabbos." Because Shabbos permeates every bone in their body and every parcel of brain in their moyach and every hergish in their lave, that it becomes impossible for them to cross that line like somebody walking out and forgetting his pair of pants. So that's the reason that they give the Chazal, and Rav Dessler brings many rayas to this, that a person who took 2 pieces of meat and thought they were 100% kosher, so he didn't make any mistake, he was told they're kosher. Why does he have to bring a korban, a chatos? And the answer is because of min hashamayim. A chiyuv chorus is so that, how did he make the mistake of thinking that they're both kosher? Why didn't he check it out? Why didn't, min hashamayim, they don't put in front of somebody certain averas, because he's at a level that he's protected and it'll never happen. So that concept of etching into our minds, like I always give the example of tzedakah, a child from the time that he understands anything, even a year old, that he has a pushkin, he puts a coin in every day of his life, that this is top priority. So when he's 60 and he's 90, he's going to be putting a coin into tzedakah every day, because he was brought up that this was carved, this was etched into the essence of his mahus. Now, at the very beginning of the Sedra, we have different psukim. One of them, for instance, Asher Nosi Yechata, that if the Nosi, or the king, makes a mistake, So he has to bring a chatos. And throughout our Seder, there are many different cases of korbanos that have to be brought for different occasions and different reasons. And a chatos is when someone does an aveira b'shogeg. So Rashi is curious, why does the pasuk say asher nosi yecheta, asher? In other words, in all the other psukim, it says v'im, and if somebody does this or that, so then he has to bring a chatas. But over here it says, by the nosi, it says asher nosi yecheta, when he does an aveira, so he has to bring a chatas. Now, we know, Rashi says, that the Lashon of Asher in this one pasuk in our Seder that uses the word Asher is from a Lashon of Ashrei, happy. That we are happy when the Nasi makes a mistake and does an Aveira, and then he brings the Chatos. What are we so happy about? So Rav David Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, said on a few occasions, leadership carries with it the test of ego. And Rashi is saying Ashrei over here, Asher, is from a Lashon of Ashrei, of happy, and we're lucky, telling us that when it comes to leadership, sometimes somebody could be a dynamic leader, and he can be a forceful leader, and he can have lots of siyata dishmaya, that his decisions are in order. But if he comes to that in front of the thousands, he has to admit he made a mistake. And he has to bring a chatas. Ashrei Hador, the generation is lucky that he has the stamina and the backbone to admit the mistake publicly. Because the Melech, if he brought a chatos, the whole world knew about it. So he was basically admitting he made a mistake and he's got to bring the chatos. Now other people may cover it up. Well, if I bring it, then they're going to question my leadership because, look, he made a mistake here, so maybe he's making other mistakes. Why do we have to follow him and follow suit with what he wants us to do and not to do? Here he made a mistake. He had to. But the leader that admits the mistake and simply brings the chatos, the generation is lucky and happy that they have such a leader. And for us, the message is that as parents, as teachers, that sometimes we make a mistake, and do we try to cover it up? Oh, I thought this or I thought that, rather than just being honest that there was a mistake made and I have to bring a korban chatas, or I have to apologize, or I have to say, please forgive me, I made a mistake. And people who do that are not any less and are regarded with the same stature and the same honor that they had before, plus, because people don't look down at people who admit that a mistake was made. And a teacher in a classroom, her authority is not, or his authority is not any less, admitting a mistake. So we have to push ourselves in the direction of doing the right thing and not making a situation which calls for leadership and backbone to make it any less and to dilute it with terutzim and a cover-up. Now, one of the psukim in our Sedra says, "V'nefesh ki sechato." He has to bring a chatos. He has to bring a female kisba, a lamb or a goat. Now, the pasuk says that if, let's say, he can't afford the lamb or the goat, so then he brings either a turim or shnei b'nei yoina. That means he can't afford. So the Torah gives him a way to be able to get his kapara, even if he can't afford to bring. And the pasuk though says, if he brings the turim, and what is that? That's like a turtle dove, or shnei b'nei yoina, young pigeons, young doves. So the Ramban says very interestingly, he asks a question that if someone can't afford the lamb, why does he bring these birds? Why not, let's say, a chicken, which also costs much, much less? And why does the pasuk say that he has to bring echad chatos ve'echad liola? And the Ibn Ezra, who lived 1,000 years ago, says that if he's bringing a lamb, it's only one lamb or a goat. But if he doesn't have the money and he's bringing birds, he has to bring one for the chatos and one for the ola. Why two? So the Ibn Ezra says, because when a person is degraded, so to speak, he doesn't have the money. Everyone sees what's going on. He can't afford to bring a regular, he's bringing a chatos, so he's not bringing a regular lamb, that he starts to have machshavas. Look at this, the Rabbanah Shalom did to me. He has tainus to the Rabbanah Shalom, even if he doesn't say it, but machshavas, says the Ibn Ezra, that he brings the Torah, and he brings the oila for the bad machshava that he has against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like an unbelievable thing. That he says, Hashem, you made me so poor that in front of everybody I can't even afford, and I have to go bring a secondary. And the Ramban points out, why was it the birds and not a chicken? Because the Ramban says that the only bird in existence in our world is a turtle dove, a tor, that it never, when it marries its mate in life, he's the mate of that wife, his whole existence. And if she dies, he never remarries. So says the Ramban. He never remarries, that his loyalty is even after death of the wife, he never parts from her. And the same thing is because he asks, why is it the B'nai Yoina? Either bring the Torah or bring Shnei B'nai Yoina, two doves, like the children of a dove, not the dove itself. Says the Rambam, because the dove itself would, if the mate dies, go and marry elsewhere. But the B'nai Yoina, still young, they have that midah of the Torah, that they will not remarry. So we want total loyalty, and that's why these two were chosen and not a chicken and not that, because they will never ever loosen and let go of their level of loyalty which they had to their mate. But the pasuk says a third thing, that if the person can't afford the lamb, and it can't even afford the tor or the shnei b'nei yoina, then he brings a mincha. Mincha was simple flour. Everyone could afford that. And he would bring the flour, and that would be, he was like Dale Daluso. He was like the poorest of the poor. So destitute, so painful. So the Mefarshim, the Chidah talks about it. Why don't, in other words, you bring a lamb. You don't have the money for the lamb, you bring a tor, or the B'nai Yoina, but one, you have to bring two. One for a chatas and one for an oila. Why doesn't the guy that can't even afford the pigeon or the turtle dove or the doves, the children of the dove, why, and when he brings a mincha, why doesn't he bring one for the chatas, which is why he's bringing it, and one also for an oila, because he also has bad machshava, that why was he put into such a terrible position? Says the Chidah that the Rabbanu Shalom had Rachmanis on him. That even though he probably has Taina HaKadosh Baruch Hu because of his destitute state, and he really should bring an oila, just like the guy before with the Torah and with the Shnei B'nei Yoina, for his bad machshava that Rabbanu Shalom, why did you do this to me? And he has such a machshava, but we don't require him to bring an oila, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, this the Chidah says, has rachmanis on this oni ve'evyon, that he can't even bring a Torah or Shnei B'nai Yona, and he has to bring the simple flour, a mincha, that he has to be able to bring, and that patters him for his machshava and for the chatas, for what he needs to actually bring. So we see the midos and the sensitivity in the korbanos. And when a person steps forward to bring a korban, what was incorporated in the totality of all of this? Now, at the beginning of our Sedra, it says Vayikra el Moshe, and we know there's a small aleph, and that's because Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to just write Vayikra, like by Bilam, who was the biggest Navi by the Goyim, and that's when Hashem met him. It says Vayikra, but Vayikra means a personal friendship. And Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to boast that he was on that level, so he wanted not to write an aleph. But he had to write the aleph, he was told, so he wrote a small aleph to deflect that it shouldn't be looked at as he's boasting that HaKadosh Baruch Hu came and spoke to me, that kind of a level. So the aleph that is small instills in us, the Mefarshim say, I mean, one is the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu, that's why he wanted a small aleph, but it is to show us that there's hashgacha, because he wanted to leave it out, but he couldn't. And just like that, in our lives, every turn of events that happens and that we are involved in, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is directing the traffic, and that is exactly the reason to express the happening in its fullest flourish of Hashgacha Pratis. Now the next word, the first word of the next pasuk is Adam ki yakriv mikem. Now that the Gemara learns up, because it says ki yakriv, which means when he brings a korban. What do you mean? If it's a chatos, he has to bring the korban, not when he brings, like it's his choice. So the Gemara learns from that we're talking about in the Nedava. Rashi brings it. That we're talking about a Nedava. That means there were times that somebody wanted to express his appreciation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he brought a korban Nedava. So the actual pasuk that the Gemara talks about it and the Medrash talks about it, that those first few psukim, there was like a space in between what Moshe Rabbeinu said, between like each parsha, like a stop. And we find that in the Torah, when the psukim are written, there has to be the space with no letter. So if you write a Sefer Torah, Sofer writes a Sefer Torah, and every letter is touching the next letter, so you could read the words, but there's no spaces, it's a puzzle of Sefer Torah. Because in the space, it connotes something that is higher than the actual word. And we find many drushes on Oz Yosher, why there's so many big spaces in the Torah on the Shira. And it's an express that is a halacha in writing a Sefer Torah. But the space is the room that when we leave for expression of love, that sometimes there's nothing you can say. There's just such an unbelievable level of love that you have for a spouse, for a child, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that space has to be there because it brings out, when someone gives a speech for someone or is celebrating something, the 50th anniversary or the 75th anniversary, that the person leaves after the words are said, that the realm of spirit, that there's such atmosphere created by the silence. And that's in the Torah why there are spaces, that it heightens the level of expression of love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu without the words. And likewise, that is the reason why the Nedava was at the very beginning, the first thing, because Nedava is an expression of pure love. Nedava isn't something that the person's obligated to bring. It's something that brings out an expression of thanks and gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is in the gather of the spaces in the Torah, al Gabbai Levana, that the space in the white areas where there's no letter gives it the ability to have that realm of atmosphere that a person has to create, and it does so when his emotion is heightened. And that's why it's written by, specifically, by Nedava at the beginning of the Seder, and has to be Mukav Gevil, which is meaning that the letters have to be surrounded and around the letters, the spaces that are And the question is asked, why by a chuppah, when we make the bracha, we said, Mekadesh Amo Yisrael al Yedei Chuppah v'Kiddushin. The Kiddushin is first. Why shouldn't it be mentioned before the chuppah? But the teretz is the exact same thing, because the chuppah is all-encompassing. You know that the reason that a kala buys a talis, and many chasanim put on Rabbeinu Tam by the chasna. So why is there no one in the world that buys a pair of Rabbeinu Tam for the chasan? But every kala buys a talis, because that all-encompassing atmosphere that happens under the chuppah, that the reason we say chuppah, because it's a uniting. A kala walks around the chosin 7 times. There's an ora makiv. That means there's a spiritual cloud that's given from the chosin when he goes to the badekin and he pulls down, and that was the kavan of Yitzchak, when he put that covering over Rivka's face. And when a chosin comes to the badekin, that's when it happens. And when she comes under the chuppah, she gives the or hamakiv, the Kabbalah Sforim say, that she walks around him and she encompasses him with that spiritual cloud that is a gift from the kala to the chosin, and that's why she buys him a talis. Because a talis is something that he puts completely over himself. It's makiv, it's the ora makiv that's given to him then, just like she gives to him under the chuppah. And that corresponds to the space of the letters. And that's why chuppah is mentioned before Kedushin, even though Kedushin was the first thing in the Gemara, at the time of the Gemara. They had Kedushin, then they went home for a year, and then they had chuppah and Nisuin. And we do it all together at one time, but we first say the Birchas Erison, which is Kedushin. But we mention chuppah because the purpose of chuppah is to bring out the space, the mukaf gvil, the space like in the Torah where there are no letters written. There's a space between each and every letter, and they can't be touching because there has to be the ability to bring out the essence of that chiba yesera, that love. And that's all encompassing why we have a chuppah above us. So I wish each and every one of you a listikin and a freilich and Purim. And this Shabbos is Shabbos Zocher, and it is a mighty weapon against the enemy of Klal Yisrael, which we need so badly right now in Eretz Yisrael. And the fact that we're coming into a time that opens up the faucets in the most dynamic, full force for Klal Yisrael, and we should be able to see it and be zoichet to it in the fullest extent.